Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Scott Starantino. I'm the Director of IT here at Williams Ripa and Associates, and we are going to conclude our effective claims tracking series with data security. So this is what we're going to cover today in the half hour. We're going to start by just giving an introduction of data security. We're going to talk about accessibility versus security. We're going to talk about the actual location, the physical location of where you would be storing your data. We'll talk a little bit about security over the Internet, specifically because a lot of things are moving towards the Internet. And then backing up your data, which is a part of your security, including data corruption and your recovery of the data. Okay, so in our previous webinars, we were talking about tracking claims, consolidating all of your claim data, and multiple reports that you can generate with all of this data. But all of these things involve handling and storing a lot of highly critical data. So we want to talk about how do we secure this data in order to make sure that we're protecting the information that we're using. Okay, so accessibility versus security. So, part of the question is how accessible is your data? So what we mean by that is there's different ways that you can use this data to generate reports. You might have clients that actually can grab the data themselves. When you talk about internet-based, that brings up a whole new spectrum of accessibility that you need to protect. So we've got a couple different ways that you might have accessibility for your data. One is that all your data is sitting on a single computer. So this might be the case where you're running a program on a specific computer, you're generating reports, and you're handing off those reports, but the data itself originates on that single computer. A lot of offices have moved into a network-type situation where you might have all of your data sitting in a central network to your office. So it's still on a system that keeps it within your office, but it's not on an individual computer, more of a server that multiple computers can access within that office. Then you have internet-based, and a lot of companies are obviously moving towards internet-based solutions. So the idea there is you can access the data through some kind of an interface throughout the internet. Access only to reports you provide. This goes back to the single computer solution and can also work with the internal network or internet-based. So this would be where you have access to all of the information, all the claims data, things of that nature, and you produce the reports. They really don't have any access to get into the system. They just have access to the reports that you're providing to them. Now, again, those reports still have critical data in them. And then you have full system access, and that's where you might have clients that can access all of your systems, probably in a view-only mode where they can actually view the claims data. They may be able to generate their own reports, but they pretty much have access to everything. So you really need to look at how you're protecting that information. Okay, so let's talk about the physical location of your data, and we're going to talk about all those different scenarios, the single computer, the internal network, the internet, some things you might want to consider. So for a single computer, imagine you're in an office, you have a computer that's dedicated to this program and all of the data. So the first question is that computer password protected? And if it is password protected, who can log in? Do you have one user ID password combination? Do you have multiple people within the office that are able to access that computer? Are you using the same user ID and password for multiple people? You basically hand it out to multiple people in the office. And another thing to think about is how often do you change that user ID password combination? So as people come in or move on to different companies, do they still know how to get into the system? Now, they might not be able to physically get to the system if it's in a locked office, but if they could get to the computer, do they actually have the capability of logging in and still getting that information? Is the data encrypted on that system? So, we talk about user IDs and passwords, but is the data itself encrypted? And, where that might come into play, there are a number of things online. If you have a password-protected computer that someone could actually find a way to bypass that security, the built-in Windows security, for example, would they still be able to get to the data, or is the data itself actually encrypted? Secure location. Now, I'm talking a physical location secure. Is it in a locked office? Is it in a lockbox? There's so many different things that you could do here. Is the computer itself actually secured? Who has keys to get into the room where the computer is, for example? And then, do you have a data recovery solution for that computer? Let's say that you're encrypted on your computer and user IDs and passwords and everything's great, and someone just comes into your office and literally steals the computer or steals the hard drive out of the computer, or the hard drive itself crashes. We all know that hard drives on computers will ultimately crash over time. So if those things happen, even if they can't get to the data, you losing your data is almost as bad, right? Because you have all this information that you're trying to provide to your clients. Do you have a way that you're going to recover that information? Okay, in an internal network, we're dealing with a lot of the same things, right? Is it password protected? Now, here we're not talking about password protecting a computer itself, but more likely protecting the files that are sitting on the server and access to that server, right? So does everyone in your office have access to that network drive or that network server computer? Are they able to tap into that from their own computer? In a lot of cases with these network drives, you're going to have public drive, or public space that everyone can access, and then you're going to have private spaces. So is this on a public portion of the drive where everyone can just access it? Again, is the data encrypted? Is that server or is that network drive in a secure location? Now, especially when you're talking about something like a network drive that's small and you really access it from outside computers, it's much easier to put that in some kind of a true lockbox type situation because the network drive is typically pretty small. And data recovery, again, going to stolen or crashed hard drives. Now, one nice thing when you're dealing with network drives, in a lot of cases, you can buy like a dual drive system. They're not terribly expensive. You'll have two literal hard drives sitting in there, and you can set them so when you're writing to one hard drive, it automatically writes to the second hard drive also. So that's not really going to help you with a stolen situation, but if one of the hard drives crashes, you can just swap out the drives, put a new fresh drive as your backup, and you're moving forward again. You can also, there's a lot of them that have utilities that will give you an updated report, let's say once a week, that'll tell you, is the drive in good condition, or is there some kind of a warning that you maybe haven't crashed yet, but something to be concerned about, that the integrity of the drive is going away over time. And that's what we do internally here with our internal drives, is we get reports that tell us, yes, the drive's still in good shape. Plus, we do have the multiple drive situation in case there is an issue. But I think getting those reports to tell you that the drives are in good condition and not, they don't see a pending crash, I think is important. Okay, now let's talk about internet-based. So we've got password protection. We're going to have that for any type of data that you have, no matter if it's on an individual computer, network, or internet. When you're talking internet-based, though, you're really talking about a server sitting somewhere in the system, and you're going to have some kind of an access through, file transfer protocols to get the files to and from, through the application itself. Would it be some kind of a special app that's built to access, or is it, something on a web browser where you log in through the web browser and then you have access to the tools? So, you got to be careful about who's got access to the server itself. And again, that goes back to the file transfers, and you might have also like a telnet, which is a way to actually access directly the server that is sitting somewhere else. And then who has application access, so who can actually log in from a web browser, for example, and access the tool. Who has access to the internet resources. So what I'm talking about there is, if you have some kind of a internet-based solution, you're going to have a computer somewhere, okay? It's going to be in some kind of a data center. Ideally, it would be a data center that's in a secure location with certifications. We're going to talk about that. But who has access to it? So if they provide tech support for that server, do they have access? Can they just log in anytime they want to your system? So that's something to think about. Again, is the data encrypted? And then secure location, where is your server located? We're going to talk a lot more about that. And then again, you need some kind of a data recovery solution. Okay, so let's talk about the data center in particular. Um, a couple things you want to look for in a data center. So the idea is you've got a server that has access to the internet that becomes a web server. So if you go to, in our case, www.williamsripa.com, for example, that goes to a computer, and that computer knows to serve web pages, okay? And then our MyRimis system is on www.myrimis.com, and that system knows to have our claim system. So you don't want that computer, for example, you could theoretically set up a web server sitting in your closet as long as it's got an internet connection. Now, that doesn't take into account, losing the internet. It doesn't take into account losing power, things like that. But you really want to look for a secure data center. I put a couple certifications here. You really want a HIPAA-certified data center. SSAE 16, which used to be called SAS 70, that's an annual audit that makes sure that there's certain protocols are in place and securities. You want to make sure that your data center has on-site security. So this should be a building that's secure where not just anybody can get into the building, to your physical server location. Dedicated bandwidth. What I mean by that is if you have, let's say, a data center that has 100 computers and they're all running off of a single internet connection where they don't dedicate how fast each individual connection is, what happens if one of the machines is just going through an awful lot of data? Is that going to slow you down? Also, dedicated machine versus a shared resource. So a lot of these basic web packages that you can get where you can just put a basic website up, they might have one computer with 40 different websites on there, and you have your little piece of that web server where you can put your website up. Now, for basic websites, that's okay. But again, it goes into the speed and the shared resource. So if you're running a full program and then you had 40 other people on the same machine running a full program, what happens when one of them is going through a lot of calculations? Is that going to slow you down? Also, you need to make sure there's security that they cannot access your portion of that server. Now, there's different ways that's done. They have new server setups that are virtual servers where they have a lot of complicated software that really separates the different users and dedicates a certain amount of memory, a certain amount of hard drive space, and the internet connection. So some of those can work, and they do have the HIPAA compliance, and they do have the SAS 70 or the SSAE 16 auditing procedures, and those can work. The other option is you have a dedicated machine. You literally have your own server sitting in a rack that is just yours, and it's for nobody else. Some other things you want to talk about or look into with a data center is power redundancy. What I mean by that is if the power goes out, does your server go down and all your customers can't access it? You want to have some kind of a power redundancy, so multiple lines coming in, multiple transformers coming in. Also, you want to talk about backup to that power. A typical large-scale data center is going to have multiple things going on. It's going to have your power coming in. It's going to have power redundancy. Then it's going to have uninterruptible power supplies if the power does go down. Now, that's only going to last you just a little bit of time, and they do that so you have this backup. And what I mean by backup is typically they're going to have multiple diesel generators or some type of generators that kick in when the power goes out. The uninterruptible power supply is there just to last long enough to where they can kick in all those generators, and as far as you know, nothing's happened, and it can run off those diesel generators or whatever type of generators until the power does come back up. With all of that, you still need data recovery because things can still happen. The drives can crash at that location, or they can get corrupted. So you need a data recovery procedure. Now, a lot of these data centers have some kind of a service that they offer to you. So, you can have their service or you can come up with your own procedures as long as it's something that does give you that security and that protection. Okay, one thing I wanted to talk about internet security. Our software is on myrimis.com, and one of the things you want to look at is that HTTP at the beginning of the web address. Now, this is an example of a secure location. It has the HTTPS and it has the lockbox. And this is Chrome. Internet Explorer might look a little bit different, and then you have Firefox or Safari. But even if the browsers are a little bit different, what you're always going to see is that HTTPS. What that means is that you are on an SSL encrypted connection. Okay. SSL has become kind of the standard for internet security, encrypted connections. And if you have a bank account or you get online to check out your credit card or something like that, they're always going to be on something like this with an HTTPS. What that really means is there is a security certificate on your server, and when people access it, it goes through this protocol, which I'm not going to get into the details, but at the end of the day, the connection itself is encrypted. And why that's important is even if the data is secured in your server and the data is secured from both ends, what about that internet connection as it's traveling, through the country or through the internet? If there are, software tools out there where people can kind of sniff on those lines and grab the data as it's traveling from one computer to the other. So this ensures that connection is actually encrypted. So even if they do that, they're not going to get any data that they can use. So there's kind of security at each location. At the source of the data, there's security at the receiving computer, and then there's going to be security, as it actually travels from one computer to the other. So you need to think about all of that. And SSL encryption is a great way, and frankly the standard way, to make sure that you have security for your web pages. Okay, now outside of the program and people accessing it from the internet, what we see a lot of are file transfers, and this is where you might have a set of reports or you have some kind of data, and FTP's kind of become the standard. That stands for File Transfer Protocol, and FTP's been around for a long time. FTP itself is actually not secure. It is the standard, and that's what everybody uses, or most people use, but it's actually not secure. There's another protocol called SFTP, and it stands for Secure FTP. It's actually done very differently than FTP, and basically what it's doing is it's using that same SSL concept, and it's transferring files using that SSL certificate. So now you have that encryption going back and forth with your file transfer protocols. From what it looks like on your computer, it might look exactly the same. If you know that you're on SFTP and not FTP, you know you have a secure connection. And we always do our FTPs securely through SFTP. And you have to have a server on each end. You have to have your FTP program has to be able to handle SFTP, and then your server where these files originate have to be able to handle that protocol and have the certificate available there, so that way the protocol works. Another option that we see a lot of is PGP. It stands for Pretty Good Privacy. What that is, instead of using SFTP to encrypt the connection, what you're doing is you're encrypting the file itself in the same manner as SFTP. You're still using a secure certificate. It's encrypting the file, and then it's doing a standard FTP. Okay, so it's using just regular FTP protocols to send. So the idea is, someone might be sniffing on the line. They might be able to grab the file because the connection is not encrypted. However, the file itself, once they get it, they won't know what to do with it. So how that works is someone that wants to use this protocol will send you a certificate ahead of time, and you'll be able to use that to encrypt the files before you send it to them, and they have the same certificate so they can actually decrypt the files. So that's what that is. Okay, so I wanted to talk about emailing data because obviously emailing is the popular way to communicate, using the computer and attachments and things of that nature. But in reality, the emailing is not really secure. And I wanted to explain kind of how it works so you get a feel for what is entailed when you're doing emailing. So let's say you're at computer 1 and you are sending an email to computer 2. So what's actually happening when you use, let's say, Microsoft Outlook or some other kind of email client on computer number 1, you are first sending that email to your server, whatever server you have that handles your email. So if you're on gmail.com, for example, there's a Gmail server, okay? So that connection from computer 1 to server 1 may or may not be secure. A lot of email providers now are requiring this SSL encryption, and a number of years ago, for a lot of the older companies, they started transitioning things over, and they asked you to make some setting changes on your Outlook. That's what that was for, to get the secure connection between computer 1 and server 1. Okay, then it goes from server 1 to server 2, and server 2 being whoever you're sending it to. So if you're sending it to williamsripa.com, for example, and server 2 would be what grabs everything that's williamsripa.com, and then it figures out who to send it to within williamsripa.com. Okay, so that internet is a cloud, right? We don't know what's in the internet. There's so many different things going on with the internet. You can't be sure that you have security between server 1 and server 2. It's just the internet. So that's always going to be a concern. No matter how you secure your emails going to your server, you're still going to have that internet in the middle. Once it gets to server 2, then server 2 to computer 2 is how it's going to distinguish which computer within williamsripper.com, for example, gets the email. So now you're dependent on the other system to be secure. So even if you're secure within your network to your web server, you still don't know what the client's doing on the other end. So there may or may not be security issues at that point. So if you look at this, you have at least 2 or 3 points of security concern. You can handle computer 1 to server 1, and you can lock that one down, but really you don't have control over the others. So let's talk about some of the options you can think about for emailing. One goes back to this PGP, where you encrypt the files themselves. So you use a program, you secure the files, then you can send it through your regular email, and if they're able to grab the file, they're just going to grab some encrypted file, and they're not going to know what that file has. Another one that I'm seeing a lot more of is secure email. And what that is you're getting an email that says there is a secure file for you to access, and there's a link on the email itself. And then you click the link, and it takes you to an actual web page, and then the web page has a user ID and password login, and then from there it looks like you have a web-based email inbox, and the inbox has the files, and you can download them, things of that nature. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, but that's kind of the standard what I'm seeing. At the end of the day, all that is they've stored it on a secure website, and they've given you a notification that's not secure, but in order to get that data, you have to go to the website, log in, get on the secure website, and that's where you get the data so you know it's secure. And there's different ways that security is going on. Some take you to an actual website. Some don't necessarily look like they're taking you to a website, but they're kind of using the same concept. So that's what's going on with those secure emails. Whenever you see that you have a secure encrypted email, those are the encryptions. They're either encrypting the file itself, and you have to log into some special programming in order to decrypt it, or they're just storing it on a secure site where you can get to it from there. Okay, so let's talk about backing up your data again. So for security reasons, for hard drive crashing reasons, and any of those types of reasons, you need to back up your data. And I'm going to give some basic recommendations from what I've seen over the years. First of all, make sure you're backing up on-site and off-site. On-site backups are great. So we have a web server in a data center. Let's say I'm backing up those files, and that's great. I have a second copy of the file, so if something happens, I can access. If it's on the same hard drive, and that hard drive crashes, well, I lost the original and I lose the backups. Now let's say it's not on the same hard drive. You have a server, and it's got 2 hard drives built in. Well, great. So now, if one of the hard drive crashes, I have the second hard drive. But now you can think about other things that could happen. What if there's a problem at the data center? Let's say they have a power surge and they blow up all the servers, or extreme cases, it catches on fire, something like that. Having an on-site and an off-site protects you from events at a specific location. So I would recommend on-site and off-site. Also, retain the previous backups. What I mean by that is every day you could overwrite the backup, right? You just need your original copy that you're working and then one backup. That way, if something goes wrong with the original, you can always go to that backup. But what happens if there's some kind of a data corruption and you don't realize it for a couple of days? Because it might not be everything. It might be some of the claims data has some kind of corruption in there. So, you don't find out for a week. Well, you've only got that backup that's maybe 1 day ago. So if you retain all your previous backups, now it does take more hard drive space, but as a result, you're able to go back any point in time and find out where was the data last valid, and then you can kind of put all your data back together. We do daily backups, and we actually date and timestamp them. So we know exactly when these backups happen, and I could go back 3 days, I can go back 4, I can go back 5, or however many days I need to go to see where that backup has the right data. Keep your backup secure. So, we've talked about all the security, all this encryption, password protection, actually having it in a lockbox. That's great if all your original data is that secure, but your backup is sitting on a hard drive in your office not locked up, and not password protected, what's the point? They can still get to your data pretty easily. So, whatever you do, I would put that backup data in just a secure location. I would make sure that you have to be password protected to access it. I would make sure it's encrypted, it's in a lockbox, or something to make sure that, if someone steals that backup hard drive, they don't still have the information like they would from the original. And this last one's very important. Know how to recover your data. Have a recovery plan. It's great to have backups, but if something catastrophic happens and you have this great backup of information, but you don't know what to do with it, and you don't know how to get it back to where your customers are back up and running, then there's no real point in the backup. So make sure you have a recovery plan. And another thing I didn't put in here, you need to look at that backup periodically. Make sure that your backup is working. That you don't just have a file and you think it's okay, and then all of a sudden you go to recover that data and you realize that data is not okay. So we have a regular protocol in place to take a look at our backups, and we have a protocol in place if everything crashes and we only have a backup and nothing else. How do we get a server up and running really fast for our client? So you need to think about all that. It's not just about backing up the data, it's about doing something with that backup data. Okay, and that's everything for this conference. I have a note down at the bottom that you can view our entire series of effective claims tracking. That's our YouTube channel right there, youtube.com/user/WilliamsRippa Associates, or just ASSOC. So you can see all the previous about claims tracking, about claim consolidation, things of that nature. Here's our contact information. I'm Scott Starantino at scotts@williamsrippa.com. We have John Starantino at johns@williamsrippa.com, and there's our phone number. You can contact us. With that, I'll leave it open. If there's any questions, feel free to send me a chat, and we'll take a look at what we've got here. Okay, I've got, here's a question about going back to the Internet access. The question is, how would you go about trying to set up something like this if you want to do Internet-based services? So what I would recommend, and what you want to do is, first you have to get your web address, right? Because you need something that everyone can access. And you can go to any of the big companies that do web domain addresses, GoDaddy, for example, register.com. Get an actual domain name like williamsrippa.com or whatever your company name is .com. Once you get that, you're going to need to get a server. I would recommend a dedicated server or a certified virtual shared service, not just a regular computer that's shared. It would actually have to be something where you have partition space and dedicated bandwidth. I like a true dedicated server personally. So you find a company, you look online, there's a lot of different companies out there that do it in most cities, or most big cities, I should say. You really want to look for, HIPAA compliance, SAS 70, SSA 16 compliance annually, raised floor data center, make sure they have the security that you're looking for, and things of that nature, the power backups and generators and uninterruptible power supplies, and the full infrastructure to make sure that they've got the 99.999% uptime, so you can tell your clients that you're going to have a 99.999% uptime. So look for one of those, and you're going to order a dedicated server that you'll have like a monthly lease fee for. And once you do that, you can go to wherever you registered the domain name and have it point to that machine. There's a lot of configuration that has to happen on that machine to make the web server work. So you might want to find a consultant that can help you with that if you're not, if you're not familiar with setting up a web server. And then from there, it's just a matter of programming the system. And you're going to program it, into your web server. You'll set up your databases in your web server for all the data, and then you can kind of customize how you want that set up. We are using, programming language with a database server, and just, simple web access. So, ours is all based on you log in from a website, from myrimbus.com, you put in your user ID and a password, and you have access to everything. There's so many different ways to do it. Some people might use some kind of an access database and have that loaded into the server where they have some kind of an online setup for that. So it really kind of depends on what kind of system you're looking for, how you want to put the server itself together. But in general, you're going to need to get the web address. You're going to need to get the server. leased, and then you're going to have to get that web address to point to the server, and then that'll get you started. Then you really worry about what you're putting on there. Okay, with that, thank you so much for your time. And like I said, go to YouTube. You can see the entire series of effective claims tracking. And we will see you next time. You can go to williamsripa.com/upcoming-events to see any future web conferences we have. Thank you so much.